Hey everyone, exciting show for you today. It is Thursday. That means we continue our expert series and we bring Jonathan Twomley back to the show. How you doing, Jonathan?
Hey, I'm great, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing very well. So, you're a big time player in the multifamily space. You sort of got out at the top, which we've talked about many times. What I thought we would do on today's show is we now have about a month of data, right? We have April. March is muddy, right? 2 weeks were good, 2 weeks were bad. April now is a bunch of data. And I think we can start making some educated guesses maybe on some trends that we see coming both in multifamily, single family, office, retail, because I think, part of our job is to play the chessboard so that we can kind of play in this game. So any kind of trends jump at you right away that you've seen from April?
Well, so unemployment obviously is horrible,
Mm-hmm.
with almost 15% unemployment.
Mm-hmm.
However, we have this enormous stimulus and a lot of the money has gotten out. So multifamily collections have been strong, and they were strong through April. It came in at about 96% of normal, which is very good.
Mm-hmm.
And also, that was the data that was collected across the country by CoStar, I believe. But
Mm-hmm.
also just talking with other multifamily owners, their collections were good and consistent with that overall data. In May, it's also looking strong so far. I think
Mm-hmm.
through the first 2 weeks, we had about 80% collections, and that's running slightly behind last year, about 2% behind last year at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's strong. So clearly, either people have a cushion that they're drawing on, or the unemployment money has gotten to them, or a combination of both.
Mm-hmm.
So they're still continuing to pay their rent, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's still too early really to say though what this means, for a couple of reasons. Because one, we don't really know, even with states reopening,
Mm-hmm.
right? And large parts of New York State are reopening tomorrow, I believe,
Yep.
actually,
Tomorrow. Yep.
and which is great news. The city is going to reopen starting, I think, June 6th.
Mm.
So we've just got a few more weeks. We've definitely flattened the curve, and it's declining, which is great. I'll tell you, when this first broke, I was hearing sirens all night long from ambulances, and now it's just dropped down to the normal.
Oh, that's good.
Sirens and stuff, which is good. So we're about to reopen, but the thing is, then what, right? So reopening, yes, but what does that really mean, right? Our restaurants, I don't believe, are going to snap back to where they were, right? And even if they let them open, they're not even going to let them open fully anyway,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's going to be partial opening. It's going to be spaced out. It's going to be different. So I think that there is going to be a significant economic impact even once we reopen. And then, we still don't know if people, once there is a reopening, if they're going to be, diligent about maintaining social distancing, wearing masks. There's a very high likelihood of this coming back. And there's already some evidence that in places that have loosened up that it is coming back. Mm-hmm. So if that does, that will just increase the fear factor again and keep people home, right? Keep them from gathering in places. So, and then you've got big swaths of the economy that are not coming back anytime soon, even with your reopening. I mean, nobody's going to a conference, right? I mean, the conference business is dead. Airlines, nobody wants to get on a plane and breathe that air, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sitting next to somebody who might be infected. There's been some crazy stuff about cruise ships, but people are jumping on cruise ships for $30 a night packages. Apparently they've reserved them anyway. I don't know when these actually are going to take place.
August 1st is what I've heard is
August
they're
1st.
taking bookings for. It's just crazy to me.
So they're taking bookings at crazy discounts,
yeah.
Right? So even if that business is back up and running, I mean, I don't know how big a discount that is, but I suspect $30 a night is probably pretty significant discount.
Oh
right?
yeah, I'm a pretty active cruiser. I mean, and a good discount on a decent cruise line used to be $90 to $100 a day. So a $30 a night stay is pretty crazy.
That's like a 75% discount, right?
Oh yeah.
Or more.
Oh, more. Yeah.
So, So yeah, so I mean, so even if the business is up and running, they're not bringing in the same kind of revenue. So
Hmm.
I think saying like, hey, oh, and then the last thing is that the additional $600 that people get with their unemployment from the federal government currently, anyways, will run out on July 31st,
Correct.
right? So unless that's extended, then I think what's going to happen is you're going to see a lot of long-term unemployed
Hmm.
people
Yeah.
who are just drawing their regular unemployment benefits, and that's going to impact uh, everything, right? So I think this is a long-winded way of saying that we the collections have been good so far, but it's too early for me
Hmm.
to make a definitive statement about what this means. I think
Hmm.
multifamily owners have been very fortunate so far, and
Yes.
and that's great. Uh, Whether you can draw any long-term conclusions from that remains to be seen. And I think that's what you're seeing in the multifamily market right now,
Hmm.
where I think we talked about last week about the fact that the prices had already dropped about 12% in a
Yeah.
month. And the reason for that is because people just don't know what to underwrite. So buyers are very, very wary about what they're buying.
Hmm.
It's funny. Somebody today sent me a deal as kind of like a, hey, look what's going on kind of thing.
Hmm.
A student housing deal in California that they were offering at an 8 cap, which is, if you have been following that market at all, that's a very good cap rate. I mean, you haven't seen 8 caps in a long time.
Hmm.
I I wrote back, I said, I think it's too expensive at an 8
Mm.
cap because we don't know if the students are even going to be there in the fall,
Yeah.
right? So that's a seller trying to get out ahead of this and hopefully, you know, find a buyer who thinks like, oh, we're going to snap right back to normal as soon as they open up business. I'm going to buy this thing at a discount,
Hmm.
and they're really going to be catching a falling knife. I think, you know, something like that. I think a lot of people are scratching their heads and going, yeah, maybe I'd buy it at a 20 cap,
Ah.
because I got to build in so much of I'd be willing to take that bet, but
Yeah.
but an 8 cap is just not enough cushion.
Yeah. So do me a favor, Jonathan. Just and if you want to give me rough numbers, go ahead. So at an 8 cap, the list price was, I don't
It
know
was
what it
20.
was.
It was a $20 million deal.
Okay, so 20 million bucks. So I
Yeah.
can't do the math quickly in my head. What is the value at a 20 cap? Is it
Oh
9
gosh.
million?
I have to know what the NOI was. So if it's $20 million deal, I mean, I could just figure this out. I
Yeah,
can't do it.
just back into it, right?
If it's so $20 million. Sorry, another zero.
Yeah, you can get to the
Um,
NOI and then
yeah, sorry, I did that backwards. 20.
that's okay. I'm thinking it's
I'm,
like,
I'm like,
gosh, 7.5 million, 8 million, just trying to do it in my head.
yeah, so the NOI is 1.6 million on that. And then
Okay.
if you do that at a 20 cap, you're talking about an $8 million deal,
Yeah, I
right?
was close.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so it's yeah, it's just which isn't going to happen. Like that deal's not going to trade for $8 million. But it might go into foreclosure if they,
No,
if
exactly. Yes,
yeah,
exactly. This is what I want to
yeah,
talk about because, again, we're in that lack of price discovery. And at
yeah,
some point, you're willing to take a bet. It's just not at an 8 cap, but you might at
yeah,
a 20. And now there
yeah,
may be someone between you that says, okay, I'll try at 15. But that's the whole art of price discovery, right?
yeah,
Where are we in this thing? Because the seller only needs one yes answer, right? It's not like,
right.
stocks and all that. So that is, wow. I think there's a lot of that going on right now, lack of price discovery and all out there.
Yeah, it's just you just don't. It's very difficult to figure out what on earth you're going to underwrite
Mm-hmm.
at the moment, right? So um, it makes it almost and that's why prices have dropped so precipitously because
Yeah.
nobody really knows what's going on, and it's going to be. So I think what's going to happen is that you know the there are always people who you know there are always people who buy in any market,
Yeah.
right? But it doesn't mean that they are necessarily going to make money, right? There are always people. There are definitely people I know. They're in my Facebook group who are absolutely convinced that, like, buy the dip, like buy right now because it's going right back up,
Oh my
and
gosh.
and like and they really are convinced that
Yeah.
that's true, and nothing will change their minds other than a really bad experience doing exactly that.
Well, pain is a
So
great teacher.
yeah, so
Yeah.
and look, they could get lucky. I mean, they could be right, but I don't think that I don't think most people
No,
are
the
thinking
risk
that.
the risk reward profile is not in their favor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really it's just too early to tell, which is why everybody's kind of got sitting on their hands. So
Yeah.
we had I can't we now we talked about so much. I can't remember if we talked about the loan originations
No,
yet.
go for it. Yeah, no, we haven't.
But yeah, so the because this is a nice sort of segue into that. The so the mortgage originations data just came out for the first quarter,
Mhm.
and uh, through the first quarter, multifamily loan originations were actually up 15%
Hmm.
year over year as compared to last quarter, same quarter last year.
Okay.
Now, again, though, we've got uh, the the shutdowns really didn't start till the middle of March,
Right.
so that includes all the deals that closed before that, plus anything that went into contract around that time,
Mhm.
right? So there were still deals going into contract and getting closed throughout the quarter.
Yeah.
I think the second quarter is really going to be where we're going to see what's happened to the market, where buyers are at,
Yeah.
because uh, and my suspicion is that there's going to be a huge drop off
Oh,
for this very reason, because
like a
people just
cliff.
don't, yeah, like people just don't know
Mhm.
what anything is worth right now, and they're not willing to take the risk, and they're certainly not going to pay, you know, January 2020 pricing
Mhm.
on these deals.
Yeah.
So that'll be a big data point that'll tell us sort of where the market's headed.
Yeah, and frankly,
But
lenders are forced that to happen, right? Even if the buyers were uber bullish, the lenders came out in late March, early April and changed the game, right? Kicked the apple cart over.
oh yeah, I mean they really changed things by requiring these huge escrows at closing. So
Mhm.
first year's debt service plus all the other escrows that you usually are paying. I mean, usually you're escrowing a couple of months of various expenses,
Mhm.
sort of like your property taxes and your things like you've paid your first year's insurance bill, but then you've also escrowed so the first 2 months
Mm.
of the next year's bill,
Right.
right?
Uh-huh.
And so, but all of that stuff now they want escrowed on day one,
Wow.
right? So that's a huge additional amount of capital that you have to raise. And even though what they're saying is after a year, if everything is fine, you will get it all back. Uh, you've got to raise all that additional money from your investors. It definitely hits the return, at
Mhm.
least for the first year, but potentially for much longer than that, because if you don't get the money back after that first year, then it's going to continue to hit your return. So
Mhm.
that changes what you're willing to pay for a property. There were a lot of people who were in the unfortunate situation where the goalpost got moved while they were under contract, and they couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
But and I know people were able to. I know some people were able to negotiate some small discounts, but really not. You know, the discounts I've seen people negotiating are not even as big as what Green Street Advisors reports as the
Yeah.
price drop, right?
Right.
Um, so a lot of people, were really caught. Uh, don't want to say with their pants down because they weren't doing anything wrong, right?
Yeah.
This is just a really unfortunate thing that
Yeah.
came out of
Bigger,
nowhere.
faster than anything we've ever seen
Yeah,
in 100 years. So
yeah.
yeah.
So
The thing that catches me about this trend is obviously I came into this, thinking multifamily, single families. And right now I've been pleasantly surprised, both in rent collection, which for us May is actually ahead of April for us. We're already at 94%. We were at I think it was 88% on the 13th. I only have data through the 13th, obviously. So we're ahead of the game. I think you're right. Most of that's tax refund from April, unemployment benefits, so I think we're good there. It does get a little scary in August. So we'll see. I do think that'll get extended, especially if unemployment stays sticky above 15%. So we'll see. But what really is interesting to me now is office and retail, big, strong tenants are already starting to renegotiate with their landlords. And then their landlords are stuck with debt that was priced at a different time. And I'm actually seeing more pain faster in the retail and office space than I had expected. And that's probably because I'm naive and I don't play in that space. But really, where I'm going to this is the second order, which is, oh my God, what happens to the big banks who have all
Mm,
this debt if office and retail default? And where I'm going with this is, does that ripple into the residential and multifamily market as kind of a second derivative? Because if banks can go insolvent for lots of reasons,
yeah.
and I'm wondering if it's going to be, God, who is levered up to New York and San Francisco real estate, meaning office, and who's got all those freaking those big mall loans? Because I need to figure that out, because that could be a problem, 2, 3 steps down the chessboard for my residential stuff.
Yeah. I think that there's one sort of positive thing I think about those sectors is that they tend not to get as much leverage
Oh, that's true.
as
60%.
as yeah, 60, maybe 65 tops,
Okay.
right, for those kind of properties, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're talking about like the class A, high class B
Mm-hmm.
office stuff. So
Okay, that's good.
they're not leveraging it at 75, 80% like multifamily. They can't get, because the risk is higher, right? The risk of a recession
Mm-hmm.
is always they've got fewer tenants to spread that cost across. So I
Okay,
think they're
that's good
not able to
news.
get as much leverage. That would help them. But aside from that, but I do agree. I mean, I think there are going to be some ripple effects from this if these landlords really start either having to take haircuts or just having like their tenants go out of business completely, and they can't fill that space again. Where they how they pay their mortgages, and if they don't, if they start defaulting, then it's the same pool of money from the banks that is lending
Exactly.
on multifamily. If they have to call, if they've got callable loans, they're going to call them uh, because they have capital requirements. They have liquidity requirements that they have to maintain.
Yeah.
So if they fall below their threshold, they're in big trouble with the regulators. So they might have to call loans, and whether they might not be able to call them from multifamily, but maybe they're going to be calling them from businesses, right? Or they're going to be
Exactly.
calling them from you know other kinds of commercial properties where the loans are callable, or construction loans,
Or
or
REITs, or I mean, yeah, I don't know.
yeah, what
That,
have
that
you. So there
that's
will
that
be a
is my
ripple effect.
concern. That daisy chain scares me, because again, I think both office and retail in most metro areas are going to suffer vacancies from non-payers, meaning retailers went out of business and tenants closed shop. But their strong tenants, the Starbucks, the Chipotle, are already talking about renegotiating leases down.
Yeah, well,
So then
listen.
they're like, ah,
So I mean, look, they JP Morgan, Barclays, and one other bank, I can't remember off the top of my head, maybe it was Citibank, in New York, just said they are going to just let their employees continue working from home.
oh wow,
And so, like indefinitely. So they
oh
are going to
Jesus,
require less space
yeah,
as soon as they can renegotiate those leases. Um, they're going to require less space. That is going to, and it's not like there's going to be a line of people behind them to take up the space.
exactly.
WeWork today, or it was announced today, that WeWork is trying to sublease its headquarters in New York. And
Wow.
now WeWork is in all kinds of trouble, but this really exposes WeWork. And WeWork is the single biggest tenant in New York City,
Oh my goodness.
and probably several other cities as well.
Oh, for sure.
Now, of course, it's a huge market. So even if WeWork is the single biggest tenant, it probably doesn't even hit 1% of the office space in New York. But still, you go out, a big tenant like that, that causes a lot of individual pain at the buildings where they are renting, right?
Yeah.
So, and where I mean, they're built like the building across the street from where my office is basically, it's like a 9-story building. It's all WeWork. The whole thing is WeWork. So if
Oh
that
wow.
WeWork, now it was packed full, but I know a lot of people ever since WeWork got into trouble have been like leaving. They feel it's uncertain and unstable. They don't know what's going to happen. The WeWork employees are all disgruntled because they've been treated terribly, and they're just a lot of WeWork employees are just like phoning it in at
Mm-hmm.
this point. Nobody's making an effort to do anything. So that business is deteriorating really fast, and that's going to have a big effect. So like if that WeWork across the street from my office goes kablooey, that you know it's all gone. That's a
Yeah.
Kushner building, by the way. So
Ah,
it's like, that whole tenant is
yeah, done.
gone, right?
Yeah.
So that whole building.
Yeah. So again, and WeWork, just to close on in San Francisco, that was where I think their corporate headquarters is. Might be New York, but anyways, they have a building in San
Mhm.
Francisco with a $240 million loan on it that is
Wow.
currently trading at 73 cents on the dollar. Right? I did the math. It's like $165 million value.
Wow.
So this is that article, which I think I read Tuesday, was kind of what got me thinking about how does this all ripple, because there's somebody who has that $240 million note that now thinks it's only worth 165 or
Yeah.
168 or whatever, and I'm like, geez, this.
Well, listen, that's why the idea that like we're going to reopen for business and everything is going to be fine is just a bad assumption for people to be making. And I don't want to. I'm not trying to like spread doom and gloom. I'm just trying to
No.
be realistic about the situation. And there is going to be there are going to be the ripple effects of this are going to be felt for quite a while, even if things were just to go back to normal tomorrow. I think that there's been a number of changes in consumer behavior uh, and people's habits
Exactly.
that will have an effect on the economy and take a while for things to get sorted out.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, like I wouldn't buy most multifamily anywhere right now, but I'll tell you one thing I would consider if it came
Hmm.
up. If you showed me a building that was like on the same block as an Amazon distribution center,
There you go. Yeah.
right? I would be willing to take that risk.
Yeah.
I wouldn't pay 2020, January 2020 pricing for it, but I wouldn't feel the need to have as big a discount on that property
Correct.
because I think that that's going to be fine for a while. And also, so many people have gotten in the habit of just ordering. I mean, everybody was in the habit of ordering everything from Amazon before, but I think that it's even more so now
Yeah.
that people are and that could become a permanent, change. And especially if the coronavirus continues to kind of linger on, then people are going to say, why am I going to take a risk?
Yeah.
Why am I going to take a risk at going to the supermarket
Yep.
if if that's how they feel? Like, I mean, some people don't care,
Mm.
but there's enough people who do care
Yeah. Well,
that
here,
it's going to
I'll
happen.
tell you a real life scenario. I don't care. I mean, if I go out, I'll wear a mask and I'll roll the dice. But my wife, she's freaked out. I mean, she
Yeah,
hasn't I mean, she's left the house twice in 45 days. So where I'm going with this is, I was always too cheap to use Instacart,
yeah,
but I haven't been to a grocery store in 45 days. That's all I use now, because
yeah,
I love my wife and I care for her. And if she's nervous, I have to be cautious. So, I mean, I don't know that we'll ever go to a grocery store again.
yeah.
So
I have
real
I have
life.
I have friends for our college classmates. We have a big Facebook group for my college class.
Mhm.
There there are people in my college class who have not left their homes since coronavirus hit.
Wow.
I mean, I think personally, I think that's nuts. I think you got to get outside and
Yeah.
just,
Sunlight's
just,
good for you. Vitamin D is
yeah,
good for you.
yeah, just be safe about it, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and I think people are being respectful, but at least around here they are. I mean, everybody's like, you walk down the street and people are like, they're like
Yeah.
walking to the edge of the sidewalk, staying away from each other. And people are being fine about it. But I mean, there are definitely people like that who have changed their behavior permanently,
Yeah. Yeah.
or maybe not permanently, but I mean, they have not left their homes, and the effect of that is that those people will probably continue to be nervous until there's a vaccine,
Yep.
and and so their behavior is going to be permanently altered. And if their spending has shifted from the store down the block where they used to buy stuff to some Amazon distribution center in, I don't even know where the nearest one is, it's essentially like a transfer of wealth
Hmm.
from that corner store owner to Jeff Bezos, right?
Yes. Correct.
So, um, and that corner store owner and their employees are all, unless they can go get jobs at Amazon,
Yeah.
they're, uh, you know, in a bad place. So that's the kind of thing, even if there is no, and there will be, but I'm just saying, just as a thought
Hmm.
example, like even if there is no thought experiment, even if there was no overall decline in economic activity, there's a shift that's
Hmm.
happening in terms of where the economic activity is going,
Hmm.
and it is going from the small businesses
Yep.
to the big
Online.
businesses.
Yeah. Online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Online, or even the big supermarkets that are capable of uh, you know implementing better screening measures and curbside pickup and like all these things that they can do. It took our local supermarket. We shop either at a local supermarket or at this brand new Wegmans that just opened in Brooklyn. And
Mm-hmm.
Wegmans, from day one, they had like a system, and you could see like you're waiting outside. They bring the carts down. They wiped all the carts down and like basically in front of you, right? You saw them getting all cleaned. When you walked in, they had all this cleaning stuff that you could use. They were spacing people out. Like they had like a really efficient like system down to make you reassured that they were taking care of business. The
Mm-hmm.
local place, like it was all like whatever until like 2 weeks ago. So it took them
Wow.
a month. It took them like a month to get any kind of like protocol in place. And I think it's because they finally did it because they probably were losing a lot of business because people
Absolutely.
were like, I don't feel safe going to this place because they're
Yeah.
just letting anybody in, whatever. So uh, I think the big businesses were, for the most part, better equipped to handle that stuff.
Yeah.
And so you've got this shift of,
Yeah. Another trend that I'm seeing, if we go back to residential, and again, this is all early data. It's only April data, and it's obviously, I think, skewed because of the source, right? You have data coming out of Zillow and Redfin talking about searches for properties sort of in smaller towns.
yeah,
And the theory they're putting out there is the great exodus from San Francisco and New York kind of inland, right? Um,
right,
I don't think it's a long enough trend, and obviously a trend is nothing without transactions. But it's interesting to see. Again, I do think there will be a noticeable trend of people going from apartments to houses. I think that is something that is certain. I think, especially if a second wave comes, because sheltering in place in an
right,
apartment is difficult or less
yeah,
convenient. That backyard is something. So I think that is legit. The other thing I'm seeing is, um, in my market specifically, is my median. Let's just call it 250 in a normal market, so call it February, there'd be 75 to 100 listings below 200K of all conditions, anything from
mhm,
fire burn to just 1950s mom never touched, right? So just fixer upper stuff.
right,
So what we just saw last Saturday when I had an agent on the line is there was nine
mm,
listings. So, and like four of them were fire burns, right? Those are must sales, right? You always kind of list those,
right,
but it's just interesting to see how it seems to be that sellers contracted more than buyers, because when I call agents on listings, there's still multiple offers. But
yeah,
I just saw a number today for the Bay Area that talked about listings are down roughly 30%, pendings are down, transactions are down, and they're forecasting a big wave of listings when the state opens up at the end of May.
mm.
But I don't know. I just think there's another shoe to drop in residential, and I'm not sure if it's going to be a buying wave or a selling wave. Then you have all this forbearance stuff. It's just like, God, it's so muddy and confusing. I don't know if you have looked at that at all.
Well, I mean, I'm always looking at uh, like Trulia every day
Okay.
because I I'm always going to have an eye out looking for a house around here
Yeah.
and a house upstate, and there's a bunch of markets I follow and just see what's going on there. And I've noticed there have been a few transactions recently, but there definitely like a lot of price cuts and not a lot of new inventory coming in the market. Like I'm not getting
Yeah. The
new
supply is
inventory
like,
notifications. Yeah, there's very little because I think everybody is taking. I mean, on the one hand, I think people are like, I don't want to hold an open house right
yeah,
now.
exactly.
But then they're also thinking, I think strategically, like, hey, I'm not going to get a lot of offers right now, so I'm just going to hold back to get, to try to get a higher price. Now, of
Yeah.
course, if everybody's thinking the same thing, and then they all list their properties in July,
Yeah.
which is typically not a good selling time anyway,
Anyway. Yeah.
um, then you're going to have a glut of property on the market, and then who knows what is going to happen
Mm-hmm.
at that point. So then it's like advantage present renter who has cash to buy, as
Exactly.
opposed to someone like me who's got to sell a house to buy a house,
Mm.
right? So uh you know so then what happens to the whole narrative of like everyone's going to leave New York City, right? If suddenly people who were on the sideline because of price, who just couldn't afford anything, suddenly are gifted like an enormous amount of inventory and a buyer's market,
Hmm.
stuff gets cheaper. Then
Yeah.
suddenly it's like, hey,
Maybe I'll stay.
I don't have to leave.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll stay, right? So again, too early to tell where anything is going, except I think most likely down to some extent, which
Yeah.
we can't yet tell, right?
Yeah. It's just interesting. And I hear people, again, I've been looking at my market for almost 20 years, and it really annoys me when people are making declarations after a month of data in probably the noisiest, least consistent market.
Yeah.
Um, the one thing I'm trying to figure out, I'd love your opinion on, is interest rates, right? Historically speaking, and I don't know that these are historic times, but historically speaking, interest rates go down in a recession, and they stay down
Right.
until we've seen a noticeable, like 2 or 3 quarters uptick out of the recession, right?
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if that happens this time. I don't know that we get a 30-year mortgage consistently with a 2 on it. I just think I think coming out of this, the risk premium that gets added from all banks is higher. I'm thinking we're going to have 5.5 to 6.5% interest rates by January or February. And that just feels uncomfortable to say into a market that is probably already struggling with price because listings swarm in and demand is scared because unemployment's at 20%. And then if you layer on an interest rate that's at 6 instead of 3.5, what happens? So I'm curious what you think about interest rates. Am I thinking too far ahead into
Yeah.
doom and
So
gloom?
I guess what you're talking about is the spreads, right? Because
Yeah,
the banks are going to be borrowing the money from the Fed
absolutely. Nothing.
at zero.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the spread.
So it's the spread. And I don't know, but I don't disagree with you. Let's put it that way. I think there's something to that because I certainly in like the multifamily, we've already seen this in multifamily where the spreads have gotten bigger because of that inability to price,
Yeah, risk.
the risk appropriately. I think in the single family home market, they're underwriting the owner,
Hmm.
more, right?
True.
And their ability to pay. So I think it's gonna. I think what may happen, you know, maybe both of these things will happen, but I think the lending standards are going to get stricter, right? They're going to look for people with better credit.
Hmm.
They've already started doing this. Better credit, who can put more of a down payment down, and have a more secure kind of job,
Hmm.
right? So that just may limit the number of buyers who are qualified to buy, and that will
Yeah.
affect the pricing a lot, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
independent of the interest rate, which might also come up, but I could see the banks possibly saying, okay, this person's a good risk, so the
Hmm.
spread is not going to be as
Well, let's
high.
let's tie this conversation with where we started this one. If again we remember that their loans for office and retail are hurting, and they're
Yeah,
calling them and they're taking huge discounts, and then they have the residential and or multifamily side, I'm just guessing they're going to have to raise the spread to help pay for the bad debt from earlier. On
yeah,
top of that, I mean, it's just like, oh, it's just I'm nervous about that.
yeah. I mean, there'll be some balancing act, right? Because if they raise the spreads too much, they won't be able to do a lot of loans. But if they don't raise them enough, they won't make enough income, right? I
Right.
mean, I think all of us are going to be paying a lot more money on our checking accounts too, right? I
Oh,
mean,
yeah,
and we're going to start seeing a lot of like weird bank fees popping up.
for sure. They got
Um,
to make it up
and
somewhere.
yeah, and credit card fees and every other kind of fee you think of to charge you for, you're going to get charged for. So,
Hmm.
and that has an impact on the economy too. I mean,
For
that
sure.
takes money out of your pocket that you can't, now you can't spend it, uh, buying Cheetos or whatever it was you
Yeah.
were going to buy with them, right? So,
Exactly. Yeah.
um, yeah,
Yeah, so it's gonna be an interesting week. I'm really looking forward to kind of when more April data comes out in really May for
yeah,
multifamily, because I think May is when you're going to see the first drop. Q2 is when you're going to see it, but I think May specifically is going to be the month because some April stuff would have been transacted pre-COVID and may have already been too late to stop. But
yeah.
it's going to be interesting.
I mean, I think so right now, as we've said, like the rent collections trend
Yeah,
through this part of the month is good,
yeah,
but it's the back end of the month that's the problem, right? I mean, those are
agreed.
your chronic late payers,
Yeah,
right? That's like, you know, you're hoping to catch up with those people, but the people, the people who have the money are going to pay right up front, and the people who are always the consistent strong payers, like pay no matter what, like they've already paid.
Correct.
It's the other people now that we're into, and I think the second half of the month is going to be telling. And I think that if we, there'll be a great collective sigh of relief if it continues to be strong through the rest of the month, and probably even some, some folks going out there and saying stuff like, see, nothing can ever sidetrack
that is going to happen. Yeah.
That's going to happen. But if the collections slide, I think there's going to be like some serious panic, and the market's going to get very disruptive. I think it'll really enter, not a free fall, but I mean, you're going to see the declines that have happened so far will be locked in and continue. So we shall see.
Very, very cool. Jonathan, this is always fun. I always love talking to you. It's one of the favorite parts of my week, man. Thank you very much.
You too. I will see you next week.
You got it. Take care.